Commander Zixthara had seen 1,000 worlds burn. Her bioluminescent tentacles pulsed with confident blue patterns as she gazed through the transparent aluminum of her flagship's bridge. The human homeworld hung before them like a blue marble. Defenseless and beautiful. Pathetic, she whispered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. Look at them, cowering on their little rock. No shields, no orbital defense platforms, just ... empty space. Her tactical officer, a younger Kethmori, with nervous green flickers dancing across his carapace, shifted uncomfortably. Commander, our intelligence suggests intelligence. Zixthara's laugh was like crystalline wind chimes in a storm. What intelligence could there be about a species that hasn't even left their solar system? They have no fleet, no weapons that can reach beyond their atmosphere. This will be over before their sun sets. The massive Kethmori armada stretched endlessly in all directions, over 2,000 vessels arranged in perfect formation. Each ship was a work of art, their hulls flowing like living creatures, surfaces shifting between deep purples and electric teals. They had conquered 47 star systems in the past decade alone. The humans would be number 48, but as Zixthara watched the peaceful blue world ahead, she couldn't shake a strange feeling. Something felt ... wrong. The space around Earth was too quiet, too empty. Where was their fleet? 3 days earlier, the first Kethmori scout ships had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. They'd expected chaos, panic, desperate attempts at communication. Instead, they found ... nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. A single human transmission had reached them within hours. Professional.com, almost bored. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command. You have entered human territory without permission. You have exactly 72 hours to withdraw, or we will consider your presence an act of war. The recording had sent ripples of amusement through the Kethmori fleet. Admiral Vexgoth, the expedition's overall commander, had laughed so hard. His bioluminescent patches had turned bright yellow, a sign of extreme mirth among his people. Did you hear that, Zixthara? He'd asked over the cum. They're giving us an ultimatum. A species that hasn't even colonized their own moon is threatening the Kethmori Empire. Zixthara had found it amusing too, at first. But as the hours passed, doubt began to creep into her mind like ice water in her veins. Where was their military response? Where were the frantic diplomatic overtures, the desperate attempts to negotiate? Instead, silence, as if the humans were ... waiting. Sir, her communications officer called out, interrupting her thoughts. We're receiving another transmission from the planet. Put it through, Zixthara commanded. The voice was the same Admiral Chen, still impossibly calm. This is your final warning. You now have 6 hours to withdraw. We will not repeat this message. That was it. No pleading. No offers of surrender. Just a simple statement of fact. Vexgoth's voice crackled over the fleet communication system. All ships, prepare for final approach. It seems these humans need a demonstration of what happens when you threaten the Kethmori Empire. Now, as the massive armada moved into Earth's orbital space, Zixthara felt that nagging doubt growing stronger. Her bioluminescent patches flickered between blue confidence and yellow uncertainty. Scan results are in, Commander, her tactical officer reported. The planet shows normal population centers, but we're not detecting any significant military installations. No orbital weapons, no hidden fleet. What about their moon base? Small research station, maybe 50 personnel. No weapon signatures. Zixthara. Primary eyes narrowed, while her secondary eyes continued scanning the displays. This made no sense. Even the most primitive species they'd encountered had at least tried to mount some kind of defense. The Therians had thrown everything they had at the Kethmori fleet, ancient nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles, even suicide runs with civilian ships converted to bombs. It had been futile, but at least they'd tried. The humans, nothing. Commander? The communications officer spoke up again. We're being hailed by the planet, on screen. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a human woman in a crisp military uniform. She was older, maybe 50 by human standards, with graying hair pulled back and eyes like cold steel. This had to be Admiral Chen. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command, she began, her voice carrying across space with crystal clarity. You have ignored our warnings and entered our space with hostile intent. This is your final opportunity to withdraw. Vexgoth est. Image appeared on a split screen, his massive form towering over the bridge of his flagship. When he laughed, the sound was like grinding stone. Human, you are addressing the might of the Kethmori Empire. We have conquered worlds when your species was still playing with fire. You have no fleet, no defenses, no hope. Surrender now, and we may allow some of your people to live as servants. Admiral Chun's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked ... bored. I see you've made your choice, she said simply. So have we. The transmission cut out. For a moment, there was silence across both fleets. Then Vexgoth's roar of laughter echoed through the comm systems. Did you see that? The arrogance. No matter. All vessels, assume attack formation. Let's show these primitives what happens when he never finished the sentence. It started as a barely detectable ripple in space, like heat shimmer on a summer day. The Kethmori sensors registered it as a minor gravitational anomaly, nothing worth reporting. But Zixthara noticed her people had evolved on an ocean world where the slightest change in current could mean the difference between life and death. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct was screaming danger. Full sensor sweep, she ordered. Something's wrong, Commander. Her tactical officer looked confused. I'm not reading anything unusual. The ripple grew stronger. Space itself seemed to twist and bend, reality warping like liquid mercury. Other Kethmori commanders were starting to notice now, their bioluminescent patches flickering with confusion and the first hints of concern. What is that? Someone whispered over the comm. The answer came not in words, but in light. A brilliant flash erupted in the void. Not the gentle gleam of starlight, but something harsh and artificial. The kind of light that meant technology, advanced technology, and then they saw it. At first it was just a shadow against the cosmic background, a dark blot that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But as it emerged from whatever impossible space it had been traveling through, the true scale became apparent. It was massive. Not just large, massive in a way that defied comprehension. The largest Kethmori dreadnought was nearly 1 kilometer long, a source of pride for their shipbuilders. This thing dwarfed them all. By the deep currents, Zixthara breathed, her bioluminescent patches cycling through colors that had no name, colors that meant terror. The human battleship was a monument to brutal efficiency. Where Kethmori vessels flowed like living creatures, this was pure industrial might. Angular, geometric, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to shrug off planet-killer weapons. Weapon batteries studded its surface like the spines of some prehistoric predator, each one large enough to house a Kethmori fighter squadron. And the engines. The engines were like captured stars, burning with a cold blue fire that seemed to freeze the soul just looking at it. Commander, her tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. That ship, it's over 3 kilometers long. 3 kilometers. The entire front line of the Kethmori fleet could have fit in its shadow. But it wasn't just the size that sent terror through the alien armada. It was the silence. No communications, no demands for surrender, no dramatic speeches about human superiority. It simply appeared, like death itself materializing from the void. Admiral Vexkoth's voice cut through the stunned silence of the fleet communications. But where before it had been filled with confidence and arrogance, now there was something else. Something that sounded almost like ... uncertainty. All ships maintain formation. It's just one vessel. We have over 2,000, sir. The voice belonged to his tactical officer, and it was shaking. We're detecting massive power signatures from that ship. Energy readings they're off the scale. Zixthara watched in fascination and growing horror as her own sensors confirmed what they were all seeing. The human battleship wasn't just large, it was a weapons platform unlike anything in the known galaxy. The energy flowing through its systems could power a small star. How is this possible? She whispered to herself. Our intelligence said they were primitives. They haven't even achieved faster than light travel. But even as she said it, she realized how wrong they'd been. That ship hadn't just appeared, had arrived through some form of hyperspace jump. The humans had FTL technology. They'd had it all along. Commander, her communications officer called out. We're being hailed. It's coming from the human ship. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life. But this time it wasn't Admiral Chen. This was someone else, a younger human. Male, with the kind of calm confidence that came from absolute certainty in one's abilities. This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez. Of the UES Retribution, he said, his voice carrying easily across the void. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from this system, or we will interpret your continued presence as an act of aggression. Vexkoth's image appeared on the split screen. His bioluminescent patches now cycling through rapid sequences of yellow and red angor, mixed with fear. Human, you are vastly outnumbered. We have over 2,000 ships. You have one, Captain. Rodriguez smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Admiral Vexkoth, isn't it? We've been monitoring your communications for the past 3 days. You know, your encryption really isn't as sophisticated as you think it is. The color drained from Vexkoth's patches. They'd been listening. The entire time, the humans had been listening to every word, every plan, every tactical discussion. You want to know what I find most interesting about your species? Rodriguez continued, his tone conversational. You assume that because we haven't spread across the galaxy, we must be weak. You never stop to consider that maybe, just maybe, ... we haven't left our system because we've been busy. Busy doing what? Vexkoth demanded. Rodriguez's smile widened. Building. What happened next would be debated in Kethmori military academies for generations, assuming any survived to tell the tale. The Retribution didn't fire all its weapons. That would have been overkill, and Captain Rodriguez was nothing if not precise. Instead, a single weapon system came online, one of the massive spinal cannons that ran the length of the ship's hull. The charging process was visible to the naked eye. Energy cascaded along the battleship's surface like lightning trapped in metal, converging on a point near the bow where space itself began to glow with barely contained power. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Vexgoth screamed across the cum. Scatter formation. Move, move. But the Kethmori fleet, for all their experience in conquest, had never faced anything like this. Their ships were designed for hunting primitives, not engaging something that could have been built by gods. The spinal cannon fired. It wasn't an energy beam in any traditional sense. It was more like a piece of a star had been torn free and hurled across space. The beam itself was invisible, but its passage left a trail of ionized particles that glowed like a cosmic highway. It struck the lead. Kethmori dreadnought, dead center for a moment. Nothing seemed to happen. The massive alien ship continued on its course, its bioluminescent hull pulsing with what might have been confusion. Then it simply ... ceased. There was no explosion, no dramatic fireball or debris field. The molecular bonds holding the ship together had been disrupted at the quantum level. 1 second it was there, a kilometer of living metal and alien ambition. The next second, it was a cloud of component atoms dispersing into the void. 2,000 crew members gone, not dead simply, no longer existing in any meaningful way. The silence that followed was absolute. Zixthara stared at the space where the dreadnought had been, her bioluminescent patches cycling through colors that meant terror, disbelief, and something approaching religious awe. By the deep currents, she whispered, "What are they?" Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the stunned silence once again. "That was our smallest spinal cannon," he said matter-of-factly. "We have 7 more, each one 3 times more powerful. We also have fusion torpedoes, quantum disruptors, and something we call a planet cracker that I really hope we don't have to demonstrate today." He paused, letting that sink in. "You now have 29 minutes to begin your withdrawal. Every minute you delay, we target another ship. And I should mention, we have you all locked on. Every single vessel in your fleet. Our targeting computers are very, very good." Panic, that was the only word that could describe what swept through the Kethmori fleet. These were beings who had conquered nearly 50 star systems, who had never known defeat, who had spent generations believing they were the apex predators of the galaxy, and in the space of 30 seconds, they had been reduced to prey. Ships began breaking formation without orders. Some tried to run, their engines screaming as they attempted to reach jump distance. Others turned to fight, their weapon systems charging in desperate defiance. All of them were wrong. Commander Zixthera's tactical officer reported, his voice hollow with shock. "We're detecting massive hyperspace signatures, multiple contacts dropping out of FTL Zixthara S. Hearts, all 3 of them seemed to stop beating." "How many?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would destroy what remained of their hope. 50... No, 70. "Commander, I'm reading over 100 contacts. They're everywhere." The human fleet materialized around them like ghosts, becoming solid. Each ship was smaller than the Retribution, but only in relative terms. The smallest was still larger than a Kethmori heavy cruiser, and they all bore the same brutal, industrial aesthetic that spoke of a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Admiral Vexgoth's voice came over the cum, but it was no longer the voice of a conqueror. It was the voice of someone who had just realized they were already dead. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our intelligence, our scouts... How did we not know?" Captain Rodriguez answered, though the question hadn't been directed at him, because you looked at our system and saw what you expected to see, he said. You saw a single world with a primitive species that hadn't spread to the stars. You never looked deeper. You never wondered why a species capable of splitting atoms and manipulating quantum fields might choose to stay home. On the bridge of her ship, Zixtera was beginning to understand. The pieces were falling into place with the horrible clarity of absolute truth. You've been waiting, she said, her voice barely audible. All this time, you've been waiting for someone like us. Not someone like you, Rodriguez corrected. We've been waiting for you specifically. The Kethmori Empire. We've been watching you for over a century, tracking your expansion, studying your tactics. We know about Kepler-4 for 2b. We know about the Tau Ceti colonies. We know about all of them. The horror of it washed over the alien fleet like a tide. Every world they'd conquered, every species they'd enslaved or destroyed, the humans had been watching, learning, preparing. Your monsters, Vexgoth breathed. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. No, Admiral, we're teachers, and you're about to learn a very important lesson about the dangers of underestimating humans. The demonstration that followed was surgical, in its precision and terrifying in its implications. The human fleet didn't attack en masse. They didn't need to. Instead, they began picking off Kethmori ships one by one, each strike calculated to send a specific message. First, they targeted the fleet's command vessels not to destroy them, but to disable their communications arrays. Within minutes, the vaunted Kethmori coordination had broken down into chaos as ship captains found themselves cut off from their commanders. Then they went after the weapons platforms, using some kind of targeted electromagnetic pulse that fried the aliens' bioneural weapon systems without damaging life support. Ship after ship found itself defenseless, drifting helplessly as human vessels took positions around them like predators circling wounded prey. But it was the psychological warfare that truly broke them. The humans had studied Kethmori biology, culture, and psychology for over a century. They knew exactly which fears to exploit, which instincts to trigger. They used their ships' running lights to create patterns that spoke directly to the deepest phobias of an aquatic species. The lights of something massive moving in the deep. Ocean depths, something that had come to feed. Zixtera watched in horror as her own crew began to panic. Her navigator was huddled in a corner, his bioluminescent patches flickering in the rapid patterns that meant imminent psychological collapse. Her weapons officer had simply shut down, staring at nothing with the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose worldview had been completely shattered. Commander, her communications officer called out, his voice thick with despair. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen. The hologram that appeared was the same calm human woman from before. But now Zixtera could see her differently. This wasn't just a military officer. This was someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. Commander Zixtera, Chen said, and the fact that she knew her name sent ice through the alien's veins. You're probably wondering how this is possible, how a species you considered primitive could so completely outmaneuver the mighty Kethmori Empire. Zixtera said nothing. What was there to say? The answer is simple, Chen continued. You made the classic mistake of assuming that technological development follows the same path for every species. You spread across the galaxy because that's what your nature demanded. We stayed home because that's what our nature demanded. The Admiral gestured to something off-screen, and the display changed to show a cutaway view of the retribution. What Zixtera saw there defied comprehension. The ship wasn't just a weapon, it was a mobile factory, a research station, a habitat, and a fortress all rolled into one. Its hull contained multiple layers of armor that could adapt to different types of attacks. Its weapon systems were modular, capable of being reconfigured for any type of threat. Its engines could apparently fold space itself, allowing for instantaneous travel across vast distances. But most terrifying of all were the construction bays. Even now, she could see new ships being built inside the massive vessel's hull. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been preparing to manufacture war on an industrial scale. You see, Commander Chen continued, while you were conquering worlds and enslaving populations, we were learning. Every species you destroyed taught us something new about galactic warfare. Every world you conquered showed us another tactical possibility. You've been our unwitting teachers for over a century. The display changed again, showing a map of the galaxy with the Kethmori expansion highlighted in red. But now there were other markers, blue dots representing human observation posts, monitoring stations, and research facilities. They were everywhere. Every major hyperspace route, every strategic system, every important trade hub. The humans had been there first, watching, learning, preparing. The question now, Chen said, is what happens next? What happened next was something unprecedented in Kethmori history. They were given a choice. You have two options, Admiral Chen explained, her voice carrying across the comm channels to every ship in the alien fleet. Option 1, you withdraw from this system immediately and return every conquered world to its original inhabitants. You dismantle your military, submit to human oversight, and spend the rest of your existence making amends for the civilizations you've destroyed. There was a pause as that sank in. For a species that had known only conquest and domination, the idea of submission was almost incomprehensible. Option 2, Chen continued. We demonstrate why humanity chose to stay in one system for so long. On cue, the Retribution's weapon systems came online. Not just the spinal cannons, this time everything. Energy cascaded across the massive ship's hull like bottled lightning, and the space around it began to warp and twist as exotic physics came into play. But that wasn't the truly terrifying part. The truly terrifying part was what appeared on every Kethmori ship's sensor display at exactly the same moment. Target locks. Thousands of them. Every human ship in the fleet had multiple weapon systems trained on every alien vessel, and the firing solutions were perfect. There would be no escape, no evasion, no last-minute heroics. If the humans decided to open fire, the entire Kethmori fleet would be atomized in approximately 3.7 seconds. Admiral Vexkoth's voice came over the comm, and for the first time in his long military career, it was the voice of someone begging for his life. Please, he whispered. We didn't know. If we had known what you were capable of, you would have done exactly the same thing. Captain Rodriguez interrupted. You would have gathered a larger fleet, developed new weapons, found new allies. You would have done everything in your power to destroy us, because that's what your species does. You are conquest incarnate, Admiral. It's not your fault, it's simply what you are. Then why give us a choice at all? Zixthera found herself asking, why not just destroy us and be done with it? The answer came not from Rodriguez or Chen, but from a new voice, older, wiser, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Because that's not what we are. The holographic display showed a new figure, an elderly human man in simple civilian clothes, sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable office back on Earth. but there was something about him that commanded instant respect, even from alien conquerors. "I am President Harrison," he said simply, "and I want you to understand something very important. Humanity could have spread across the galaxy centuries ago. We could have built an empire that would have made yours look like a child's sandcastle. But we chose not to." He leaned forward, his eyes holding depths that spoke of decisions that affected entire worlds. "We chose to stay home because we knew that someday someone like you would come. Someone who believed that might made right, that the strong should rule the weak, that conquest was the natural order of things. And when that day came, we wanted to be ready." The president stood, moving to a window that showed the blue marble of Earth hanging in space. "You've spent centuries proving that the galaxy needed guardians. Today, you met them. The surrender, when it came, was not dramatic. There were no final, desperate charges, no last-minute attempts at negotiation, no theatrical speeches about honor and death. Admiral Vexkov simply activated his fleet-wide communications and spoke 2 words that would echo through Keth Mori. History for generations to come. We yield. Across 2,000 ships, weapons powered down, engines went silent. The proud bioluminescent displays that had announced Keth Mori. Dominance faded to the dim glow of a defeated people. But the humans weren't done. "All Keth Mori vessels will proceed to the coordinates we're transmitting," Admiral Chen announced. "You will remain there under guard while we verify your compliance with our terms. Any attempt to flee or resist will be met with immediate destruction." The coordinates led to a position just outside Earth's orbit, where the aliens found themselves surrounded by an ever-growing human fleet. Ships continued to arrive from the outer system, not just warships, but massive industrial vessels, mobile space stations, and craft of designs that defied easy categorization. Commander Zixthara watched it all from her bridge, her bioluminescent patches dim with exhaustion and defeat. Her tactical officer approached hesitantly. "Commander," he said quietly, "I've been analyzing the human fleet composition. Based on the industrial capacity we're seeing, I estimate they could have fielded 10 times this number if they had wanted." 2. Zixthara nodded slowly. Of course they could have. The humans had been planning this for over a century. What they were seeing wasn't the full might of humanity, it was just a test run. "Sir," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a personal message. It's from the human captain, Rodriguez. Put it through to my private channel." Rodriguez's face appeared on her personal display, but the arrogance was gone. Instead, there was something that might have been respect. "Commander Zixthara," he said, "I wanted to speak with you personally because our intelligence suggests you're different from the others. You questioned the mission from the beginning. You saw the signs that something was wrong." Zixthara said nothing, but her patches flickered. "With acknowledgement, the human fleet will be escorting your people back to your home system," Rodriguez continued. "But we'd like to offer you something different. A chance to see what the galaxy could be like when it's not ruled by conquest and fear." "What are you suggesting?" "Join us. Help us rebuild what your empire destroyed. Become part of the solution instead of part of the problem." For a long moment, Zixthara stared at the human captain. Then, slowly, her bioluminescent patches began to shift from the dim colors of defeat to something brighter, something that might have been hope. "What would I have to do?" Rodriguez smiled, not the predatory expression from before, but something warmer. "Learn," he said simply. "Learn what it means to protect instead of conquer. Learn what it means to build instead of destroy. Learn what it means to be part of something larger than yourself." Zixthara looked around her bridge at her crew, then back at the human captain. When do we start? 6 months later, Commander Zixtera stood on the observation deck of the EU's Harmony, watching as human and former Kethmori crews worked together to construct a new type of space station. Not a weapon platform or a fortress, but a hospital. Ship designed to help the survivors of worlds her people had devastated. The irony wasn't lost on her. The species she had once considered primitives were now teaching her people how to heal instead of harm, how to build instead of destroy, how to protect instead of conquer. Captain Rodriguez joined her at the viewport, his expression thoughtful. "Any regrets?" he asked. Zixtera's bioluminescent patches shifted through complex pattern colors that meant growth, change, and something approaching peace. "Many," she said honestly, "but not about this choice." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching human and alien engineers work side by side. Then Rodriguez spoke again. "You know, there's something I never told you about that day. About why we really gave you a choice." Zixtera turned to look at him. "President Harrison was right when he said we're not conquerors," Rodriguez continued. "But there was another reason. You see, our psychologists studied your species for over a century. We knew that some of you individuals like yourself were capable of change, capable of growth, capable of becoming something more than what your empire made you." He gestured toward the construction site where former enemies now worked together toward a common goal. Every species deserves a chance to evolve beyond their worst instincts, even yours, especially yours. As if summoned by their conversation, Admiral Chen's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All hands, prepare for hyperspace jump. We've received a distress call from the Centauri system. Another aggressive species has decided to test humanity's resolve." Rodriguez sighed and straightened his uniform. "Duty calls," he said. "Want to come along, Commander? See how we handle first contact, the human way." Zixtera's patterns shifted to colors that meant determination and purpose. "I thought you'd never ask." As the Harmony jumped to hyperspace, carrying its mixed crew toward another potential crisis, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had announced its presence, not with conquest, but with justice, not with destruction, but with the promise of redemption, and for the first time in millennia, the stars themselves seemed a little brighter. This story serves as a reminder that true strength isn't measured in the worlds you conquer, but in the lives you choose to save. That the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, but turning them into allies. And that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the universe isn't a weapon of mass destruction, it's someone who gives you a choice when you don't deserve one. Thank you for joining us for another tale of humanity's place among the stars. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more HFY content, and let us know in the comments what you'd like to see next. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the species that chooses to stay home. They might just be waiting for you